Big D, huh? What does that stand for, actually? How about big dummies? That's what it stands for in Dallas. They got stuff falling all out of the roof. We'll talk about it here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On NFL, where we go over the top stories around the league with the help of local experts. Today, your local expert is my buddy, Kevin Ostracker. All right, here's what we're going to do, man. Today's show first is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. That's right. Head on over to FanDuel right now. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us here every single day on Locked On NFL, where we go over the biggest stories with the local experts that know your team like no one else. Also, make sure you slide on over to Amazon Music and check and find the Locked On NFL podcast over at Amazon Music. Kevin Ostracker, we got a lot to talk about today, man. And normally I don't do this, but at some point I'm going to let you talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens. You know, as I put Pittsburgh first, man. But first, we're going to get to another team. That is the Dallas Cowboys. That is what we said as soon as I opened this show today. I said something about the Dallas Cowboys because we have to, and I jokingly called them big dummies because that's what we do in the barbershop. But they're only dumb because Jerry Jones seems like he has all the answers until the game starts, right? And he always has all the answers for everything. They are a horrible football team, man.
Yeah, you're going with big dummies. I'm going with big disappointment for this Dallas team. But, you know, with how their seasons have gone recently, is that really too far of a thing to say even before the season, right? I mean, they got embarrassed at home against Green Bay in the wild card last year, and they waited forever to sign both CD and Dak to extensions and cost themselves a lot of money in the process because receivers and quarterbacks are signing over and over and just increasing the price of both CD and Dak. And they obviously don't really sign anybody in the offseason. We've talked about you and I, Derrick Henry, and how he's now in Baltimore, which I'm very thankful for. So thank you, Jerry Jones. But I think for me, you now look at how this team plays and you look at this roster. Wig, we know the calling card of this team forever has been their offensive line. We know that when you talk about Dallas and you look at that team, it was Tyron Smith back in the day, who's now obviously in New York. But, you know, they drafted like Zach Martin. They drafted a first-round offensive lineman this year in Tyler Guyton. They've just been solid there. And it's been a disaster on that line this season. Dak's obviously hurt now. Cooper Rush I don't even know if he's a backup in this league based off of what we've seen from him. And that defense, man, is just falling off a cliff. And I know because I drafted them like every single fantasy league. And now they're off my team in every single fantasy league. And they cost me games. Or I remember they had that like -8 performance. I forget against who it was, probably multiple. But their only stars on this roster right now are CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons. That's all they have. And for a team that is supposed to be America's team and, you know, all this, and you want to go play there and represent the star on your helmet, man, I'm not sure anybody's going there again this offseason. They have to do a full overhaul. But, I mean, how far is this team really going to go with Jerry still in charge?
You're right. If you think you're mad because you got him on your fantasy team, how about Landon McCool? How mad is he that he covers them every single week and has to figure out what to tell the fans? Listen to this.
Another home game, another 2-touchdown blowout loss for the Dallas Cowboys. Hi, I'm Landon McCool with the Locked On Cowboys podcast, and despite a valiant effort through most of this game, by the time the fourth quarter rolled around and Cooper Rush was strip-sacked, Tyler Guyton picked up the ball, and then he got strip-sacked, and then that ball was returned for a touchdown to put it at 27-10 at that point in the game. That's when the game's wheels just completely fell off. Dallas could not hold on and couldn't keep up with the scoring that Houston was able to do against this depleted Dallas Cowboys defense. And then the injury started to happen on the offense, as at one point the Cowboys were down to their 7th and 8th offensive linemen as Zach Martin and Tyler Smith were both injured. Just another blowout loss at home, another 2-touchdown plus loss. There's lots of things to talk about, including injuries and ineptitude. Make sure you check us out on the Locked On Cowboys podcast this week to talk all about it.
The Dallas Cowboys not having offensive linemen is like the Baltimore Ravens not having, a 6'3", 250-pound pass rush tweener. I mean, it's just like, it's almost like, how do we not have that? Because we always have that. But they're missing not only that, they're missing leadership. And Jerry Jones, man, has to do some soul searching. And it's hard to imagine a guy like Jerry saying, okay, this is on me. It's never going to happen.
No. Yeah, I mean, based off his comments, based off what we've seen from him over the years, I mean, you put it perfectly earlier, Wig. He feels like he has all the answers. Then when game time comes, he forgets all of them, like, you used to do on tests where you study and study and study. All right, I got it all down. That paper gets put in front of you, and everything goes out the window. And that feels like that's what it is with this Dallas team. It's
like he studied multiple choice, but now it's not multiple choice, it's Q&A. You have to answer the question, and the answer ain't going to be in front of you. And with Jerry, he's had to answer in front of him. It was Jimmy Johnson. He got rid of him, so ain't no telling what's going to happen. There's another team in Texas, though, that says, hold my beer now. We're getting a little bit healthy. We got our wide receiver back. We're going to put some work on you and let everybody know that that little blip that we had a few weeks ago is gone, and that's the Houston Texans. Listen to John Hickman with his old happy self after the game last night.
The Houston Texans finally score a touchdown in the second half of the game, which helps them beat Dallas 34-10. I'm John, some sports guy Hickman of the Locked On Texans podcast, your team every day. It's been 5 weeks since the Houston Texans scored a touchdown in the second half, and not only did they get some help from their offense as Joe Mixon was able to run it in, but the defense got involved as well. The defense had a destroying day for the Houston Texans, really forced Dallas to get uncomfortable early, and they were never able really to recover as they held them to 10 points. I think the biggest story of the game, Derek Stingley is absolutely, for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, an all-pro and a top cornerback in the NFL. And getting Nico Collins back really did help that offense as they were able to put up points early and they looked more comfortable. Please make sure you watch the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and listen to it wherever you get your audio podcast. More later in the week.
Yeah, they look good last night, man. Joe Mixon, and I know Bengals fans, and you can talk about this because of your AFC North ties. I know Bengals fans are like, damn, man, we let him go. So it's not just Derrick Henry and it's not just Saquon Barkley, whose team that they departed has to sit there and second guess themselves. We forgetting Cincinnati need to be second guessing themselves too because they can't run the ball.
Yeah, Cincinnati's a whole different conversation. I could go on we could do a whole nother show on the Bengals and everything there. But yeah, Houston looked good, and I think they needed a game like this, even if it's against a Dallas team that's struggling, even if it's against the Dallas team that's depleted. I mean, if it wasn't going to happen against Dallas, who was it going to happen against? Like, who are you going to show off your dominance? Who are you going to show that you're still the good football team against? They did what they were supposed to do, right? CJ has kind of struggled compared to what we saw during his rookie year last year. Losing Stephon Diggs is a big blow to that offense, but they get Nico Collins back, and that certainly helped. Just even if it's taking stress off of the other playmakers, having Nico Collins out there really does help. But that Houston defense, I'm so impressed with that group, man. I mean, they bring in Daniil Hunter, and John mentioned Derek Stingley in his post game over there. That defense has dudes on it. The one concern over there for me, the offensive line has been very up and down this year for them, and it's been a huge point of contention in terms of protecting CJ Stroud. But hey, Joe Mixon has no problem running behind those guys. He's balling out, like you said, and that's a team that is probably going to be locked into the 4 seed unless they can go on a huge run here. But even as a 4 seed, and if you're that 5 having to travel to Houston, that's even though people are writing off the Texans right now, I still think that's going to be a good game regardless of who goes and plays them.
It's not an easy game for anybody, and you're exactly right about that. Speaking, I'm glad you mentioned the playoffs because I'm going to bring up 2 teams. One of them people thought was going to be there, and the other one, well, we didn't. It's the Steelers, and the Denver Broncos. We'll talk about both of those in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by pre-alcohol. That's right. Pre-alcohol is the absolute truth, man. It is a drink by Z-Biotics. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to take Z-Biotics before your first drink and make it your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Every time me and my wife has had pre-alcohol when we go on vacation, I notice a difference the next day. Even after a night out, I can confidently plan on getting all of my activities in the next day without worry. So here's what you do, man. Step 1, pre-alcohol. For the best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly, of course. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. Z-Biotics is back with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Today's show is also sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place those bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. And make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I rolling along here on Locked On NFL with my brother from another mother, Kevin Ostracker. Locked On Ravens, Locked On NFL, Locked On everything else. He's all over the place, kind of just like me. They're always seeing Ostracker's face. Listen, man. I don't mean to do this to you because I always me and Ostracker got this little bit where we go on and on and on. I always bring him up when I'm talking to Chris Carter every Thursday, and I always tell Ostracker that he cannot talk about the Ravens. So today he's going to talk about the Ravens by default because we're going to talk about the Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers won the first of 2 highly contested, highly contemptuous games against their fellow bullies, the Baltimore Ravens. All right, Ostracker, that's 8 out of 9. That's 8 out of 9. What y'all going to do, man? The bully is getting bullied, and this rivalry is looking a little one-sided these days.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I'd call it a rivalry at this point. I think the Ravens have to win a game in order to kind of get that title back. But it's rough, man. I mean, whether you talk about close games, which they always are between Baltimore and Pittsburgh, you always get those like divisional AFC North, physical football games. But to me, Pittsburgh goes out there and they beat the Ravens in a lot of different ways that, a lot of other teams can't. And part of that is the familiarity, I think, of divisional matchups. The Pittsburgh defense is really good. And part of what I think makes Pittsburgh's defense so good and something that the Ravens can't figure out is that usually defenses have to have multiple guys play multiple different roles. But Pittsburgh has so many studs on that defense that you say, all right, TJ Watt, you go do 3 jobs, and he does them all really well. Minka Fitzpatrick, go out there, do 5 jobs. He does all those really well. Where usually you'd have to have 3 guys do what Minka Fitzpatrick does, 2 guys do what TJ Watt does. And so Pittsburgh has more at their disposal because their defense is so good.
And Cam Hayward. And Cam Hayward's the first ballot Hall of Famer. And they don't rotate them out like I ain't going to even talk about the Jaguars rotating their best players and acting like everybody on that team is as good as the starters. Pittsburgh guys, they are always out there on that field. I want you to hear Chris Carter. I know it's hard for me to put you through this, man. I'm sorry. But listen to Chris Carter and his enthusiasm after the victory over Baltimore.
Hey, everyone. Chris Carter here from the Locked On Steelers podcast here at Acrisure Stadium after the Steelers have taken down the Baltimore Ravens 18-16, advancing to 8-2 and claiming a 1.5-game lead in the AFC North. But it was a huge defensive game in this contest. The defense holding the number one scoring offense to just 16 points, getting several big turnovers. Nick Herbig with the punch out, Patrick Queen with the punch out, Peyton Wilson with the interception. The Steelers linebackers making big plays in a big game. And when I talked to the Steelers defensive players afterwards, they all talked about the plan and how the plan was put together well. They studied well. Even on the 2-point conversion, they had to stop to hold on to the lead at the end. Joey Porter Jr. told his team, we're not letting them get it here. And he was the one that had great defense on the play, forcing Lamar Jackson to have to hold on to the ball and eventually making a mistake there. The offense doesn't do well in the red zone, but gets in field goal position and lets Chris Boswell win the game. These kind of games, it just matters that you get the win. We'll talk about more about how they did that on the Locked On Steelers podcast.
Listen to me, man. Baltimore plays a certain way, and they do some stuff really, really well, and you know that more than I do. The things that Pittsburgh are capable of doing works right against the strength of Baltimore. I think if Baltimore is ever going to beat them and get over the hump, they got to do it a different way. And that's hard to make a team that is so successful against everyone else flip the switch just for one club.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh made Baltimore make mistakes, and Baltimore themselves made mistakes. And that's been the theme with the Ravens, which is they hand these games away, where Justin Tucker, who's been the best kicker of all time, in my opinion, maybe a little Ravens bias coming out there, but hey, I think it's true. He misses 2 kicks. And that's 6 points in a 2-point loss. You know, end of the half, Ravens get the ball back with 38 seconds left deep in their own territory. They don't kneel the ball out. They decide to try to get something going with a kicker who just missed 2 kicks. They throw a short pass to Isaiah Likely, who the ball gets ripped out of the hands of. Patrick Queen gets the recovery. And all of a sudden, Pittsburgh can kick a field goal heading into halftime. That's 3 points in a 2-point loss. So Pittsburgh was able to take advantage of opportunities. And this is that team. Mike Tomlin has those guys ready to play each and every single week. And he has dragged rosters that we're talking about, like top 10 in draft order rosters, to a wild card berth. Like, that is how crazy good of a coach Mike Tomlin is. And I get that some Pittsburgh fans are kind of tired of it because they haven't really won playoff games recently. Yeah. And, you know, the playoff success, like Super Bowl wise, hasn't been there recently. But Mike Tomlin gives that team a chance regardless of the roster. But here's the thing. That roster is actually very, very, very good this year. And while the offense was not good whatsoever against Baltimore, Russell Wilson is better than what they've had at quarterback over these last few seasons. So obviously the rematch between Baltimore and Pittsburgh probably decides the division. You know, I'm sure it'll probably come down to it in some way, shape, or form. But Pittsburgh got a big boost by winning this game. But I mean, you got to give respect where it's due. And I hate doing it as a Ravens guy because that rivalry is real. Right. But Pittsburgh has had the Ravens number over the last handful of seasons, and I'd be lying to you if I said that wasn't true.
Baltimore is the best 5-4 team I've ever seen. And the reason why I say that is because they are way better than their record indicates, but they lost 2 gimmicks to 2 teams that are amongst the worst teams in the league, and the Raiders and the Browns. And I think that that's going to just come back. That's probably the thing that's going to make people go, they're overrated. They're not. They just lost 2 games they shouldn't have lost. And, you know, they actually played the Chiefs and the Ravens super, super tight, and it was a 1-possession game right at the end. I think they're closer to that team than they are the team that lost to those other teams. One team that I have to constantly, every time I mention them on here, I got to apologize. I said that Sean Payton was going to get run out of the league because Sean Payton, the GM, was going to ruin it. Boy, was I wrong. And there's nothing, you know what's worse than being wrong? Continuing to be wrong once you see something. And I know people will say Denver has, you know, look at who they beat. I'm talking about the way they're playing. They've beaten every team they played in the NFC South, for one. The other thing is they should have beat the Chiefs, and they have played really, really good football. The other day they beat the Atlanta Falcons. Listen to Cody Rourke and how happy he is about that.
The Denver Broncos improved to 6-5 on the season after a 38-6 drubbing of the Atlanta Falcons. This is Cody Rourke, host of Locked On Broncos, and not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 touchdown passes for rookie quarterback Bo Nix, fresh off of a Rookie of the Week award-winning in terms of NFL honors. Now he's in the conversation to be able to do it here once again, and he is in the conversation for NFL Rookie of the Year as he's continued his upwards ascension here. The Broncos 6-5, now in a good position. When you look at the AFC playoff picture, they'll now travel to take on the Las Vegas Raiders next week. But a big win for the Broncos against the 6-4 Falcons. Now the Falcons are 6-5 for post-game coverage. Check out all things Locked On Broncos wherever you get your podcasts. We're available on YouTube.
I did not have on my bingo card, including Bo Nix in the Rookie of the Year. In fact, I didn't have on my bingo card halfway through the season, at least halfway to this point, 5-6 games in, to put Bo Nix in that category. We'll talk about Jaden Daniels in segment 3, but he's right, man. Denver's good, and they are the type of team that will be because in the playoffs, it's about attrition. You can win, but what did you leave? Did you limp away from the game, and now you got to go into a game the next week? They are a team that can make somebody limp into another playoff game.
Man, that defense is legit. And Bo Nix, I know we've seen a lot of ups and a lot of downs from him this season, but when he is on, he is on. Now, again, as a rookie quarterback, there are going to be those moments of, you have a bad game. That Baltimore game was a prime example of that, where, he couldn't get it going. He was in his own head, and that was a bad game from him. But I think he's been a lot better than a lot of people thought he would be year one. I think this is probably what people expected. Best case scenario, maybe year 2 or even year 3 from Bo Nix. We're seeing this in his rookie year. And Denver, they traded away Jerry Jeudy. They kind of did a mini teardown in ways where they were maybe looking to trade Cortland Sutton, but he's there. And, their run game has been weird all season. And, it's Cortland Sutton and really not a lot of other people in that wide receiver room. It's guys like Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin who have to step up. And Bo Nix is making a lot with a little here and still performing really well. And I think that to me is the most impressive thing for Bo this year.
I'm glad we got these two, and I did this by accident, by the way. I ain't gonna sit there and act like I'm all great at programming these shows, but I'm glad we got these two in the same segment, because what it is should be a case study on just because a guy doesn't fit with me doesn't mean he's trash. And I think sometimes in fandom, Russell Wilson is trash. Sean Payton, he just wasn't a fit for Sean Payton. He might be the reason why Pittsburgh is taking the next step, though. So stop thinking. I think fans need to stop thinking that, okay, just because a guy doesn't fit somewhere, that means he's bad, because he'll go somewhere else like Russell Wilson, and he'll be one of the reasons why people are so high on a team. Now, we did mention Bo Nix. Is he right there in the Rookie of the Year? I got my own thing to say about it. We're going to talk about him and Jaden Daniels and what is going to determine down the stretch who's going to be awarded the Rookie of the Year, and maybe mention some other people. I'll even ask Old Striker who the MVP is and let him think about that for just a second. We'll keep going with it and finish it up here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Built Rewards. Listen up, renters. If you ever felt like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air, it's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Real talk, we've all been there feeling like we're burning cash with those rent checks. It's frustrating. Here's the deal. Built Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to renters revolution with Built. That's B-I-L-T. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent every month. Pay your rent and watch the bills roll in. Use points to jet off on dream vacations. Put your points towards a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties. You can also use points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're all designed to meet your lifestyle. Earn points by paying rent right now when you join built.com/lockedonnfl. That's join Built. That's JOINBILT.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure you use our URL so they know we sent you. Join built.com/lockedonnfl to start earning points with your payments today. All right, segment number 3 here on Locked On NFL, along with Kevin Ostriker. A lot of talk right now about MVP. You heard Cody Rourke, all pros. You heard John Hickman earlier say Darryl Stingley's an all pro. I don't disagree with him. I was a big fan of his coming out. And you also heard Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos talk about the possibility of Bo Nix being a Rookie of the Year candidate. I liked him in college. I didn't think he was going to ever be like that, but this shows you what having structure and a really, really good coach does for you and understands. And guess who else has that? Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels has that in Washington.
Yep. And look, I think there was a lot of, I don't want to say controversy about the rookie quarterback class, but there are a lot of question marks, I'd say, about how good this class was going to be in year one. A lot of hype obviously was there for Caleb Williams, and he's arguably been the worst. I mean, if it's true, he's been the worst out of the three between Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, and himself. But part of that is we talk about situation. And Chicago's situation right now is terrible. I mean, everybody's talking about that. Chicago's an awful place to be right now. They're going to have to fire Eberflus at some point. They moved on from their old coordinator, but you see stability for the first time in a while in Washington.
You do, man.
And that's huge. And then you talked about Sean Payton and just kind of like, oh, is it going to work? Is it not? It's kind of a 50-50 throw up. And here we are. Bo Nix is playing for Sean Payton, playing for that team really well. And yeah, I think right now, probably a two-player race between Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. Because quarterbacks, I'm talking quarterbacks.
Absolutely. And there's nobody that can tell you better than that than our Locked On NFL Wednesday host, David Harrison, who covers the Commanders. Listen to what he has to say. I think he's going to say a little bit more than Rookie of the Year for Jaden Daniels. Watch this.
Washington Commanders MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Newcomer of the Year, and Coach of the Year mid-ish way through the season. Rookie of the Year, probably the most obvious award, mid-ish season award to hand out here on this slate, and that is, of course, going to go to quarterback Jaden Daniels. And as far as the Rookie of the Year NFL race, Bo Nix has certainly been able to do some things to turn up his own candidacy. Team MVP, and again, these are all just offense. Wide receiver Terry McLaurin. He's on pace this year to have 74 catches, 1,113 yards, 9 touchdown receptions, which would be a career high. Certainly one of the better years in his career. Newcomer of the Year, center Tyler Biadasz. The offensive line in Washington right now is top 10 in blocking efficiency. His pass blocking efficiency personally is 98.8, which is the best on the Washington Commanders roster. And that leads us kind of into the offensive coach of the year and offensive line coach Bobby Johnson.
A lot of whole of the year awards going to Washington, but he's right, man. It's nice to have a whole bunch of people to choose from. And I think all of this got easier. It's like we talk about how you insulate your team for a rookie quarterback. A lot of this got easier because their rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels, is so dynamic. And now it's even made guys like Cliff Kingsbury hot again on the trail.
Man, Jaden Daniels is out there balling out, and I get, the game against Philly on Thursday was not, his finest moment for sure. And in terms of actual MVP race, that probably put his conversation to bed a little bit because you have a couple other guys very much ascending in that conversation. But Jaden Daniels is going to have a heck of an NFL career. I mean, I think Commanders fans, and they already are, but they should be as excited as they have been in decades for how this team is going to perform in the future, because this was always an experimental year. I don't think anybody expected this to happen for this Commanders team. I mean, first of all, the rest of that NFC East is just like bad, I think. I mean, Philly's kind of finding their stride here, but to me, I think that everybody expected Washington to say, oh, well, it's development year for Jaden Daniels, and they're kind of build out this roster. Well, they're doing this with an experimental roster, and when they have an offseason, this upcoming offseason, to add pieces, right? Get a couple other receivers in there, not named Terry McLaurin, figure out some of their defensive issues. Man, you put that team around Jaden Daniels, year 2 could be pretty scary. But in terms of this year, he's put himself firmly in the Rookie of the Year conversation, and I honestly would probably still give it to him.
Yeah, one thing to be really, it's a lot to be really happy with him about, but one thing that I am super, super happy about, which you never know with rookies, is not just how he physically handles it, but his mindset and the way and his body language and how he moves. He looks like he's beyond his years. And that bodes well for that team, because if Cliff Kingsbury does get a job, Jaden Daniels is still going to be Jaden Daniels even without Cliff Kingsbury. Locked on NFL is going to be Locked on NFL all the time, every single week. Kevin Oestreicher joins us here on a Tuesday, and there's 2 shows now. The AM show with Tyler Rowland, the Madman. He'll wake you up with a double shot of espresso that'll hit you upside your head, and then you slide through in the middle of the day in the barbershop, and this is what you get. Local experts that know your team just like anyone else, and we use all clips from Locked On NFL hosts from around our great Locked On Podcast Network. Kevin Oestreicher, as always, man, it has been real. We'll see you next Tuesday. Keep it real for Oestreicher, for Wig here at Locked On NFL, and everyone else. Make sure you take care of yourself, and we will do the same.